Welcome to today's episode. In episode 3, we are going to dive deeper in the latest AI news in the cloud space. So first, we're going to start with Anthropic's latest releases with Claude Opus 4.7, with Claude Design, and especially also the ramp up of Claude Code. We will also dive deeper into Mephos, which is the latest model coming from Anthropic, which is currently just available in gated research peer review. And we will also talk about what the implications are of such models which are hyper-focused on cybersecurity. Then we are going to dive deeper into Gemma 4, the open source model by Google, into NemoClaw by NVIDIA, which is a variant of OpenClaw, which is created by NVIDIA for enterprise. Then we will head into the latest news from OpenAI when it comes to the Agents SDK, the upgrade of Codex desktop with new features like computer use and browser use. And then we will also have a look into OpenAI Frontier, which is a agentic architecture provided for enterprise. And we will also have a look at what this means in bringing the right data strategy for your agents. And then we are going to wrap up with a short deep dive into Stateful MCP on Agent Core. With that being said, have a lot of fun and let's go. Great. How are you doing, Stefan?
Fantastic. Can't wait for this episode because lots of packed news that we want to share. So what do you have for me today?
Yeah, so I can make the start today. Let's do the first round with Anthropic. So quite a few things happened there. And I would say the release cycles are getting faster and faster. And one of the things which just dropped is Claude Opus 4.7. And this model is having the same pricing as the previous Opus model. But what we can see is already in terms of coding capabilities, now Opus is the leading one. I think a few weeks ago it was GPT 5.4. Now Opus could actually increase the coding capabilities on the SWE benchmark by over 10 points compared to the previous Opus model. So this is significant. And it also brings few newer things when it comes to its own architecture. So for example, what Anthropic has done is they have optimized the tokenizer. This can lead to more tokens, especially for the input you're sending to the model. So what they are saying is it is either exactly the same or up to 1.35 more tokens. And this leads also to a behavioral change. The Opus 4.7 is by default in a reasoning mode. So it is always reasoning now in this new release. And what Anthropic is saying is that there are several benefits now coming with the 4.7. So you have, for example, a better high resolution vision. So what it means then in a day-to-day development flow, you can actually take documents and now the precision on how Opus 4.7 reads these documents or how it reads photorealistic images of, for example, human-made scenarios, it can really get the details now much better. And they call it a one-to-one pixel mapping. So I think this is going to be really exciting. Then a few more things which happened around the context window. So the 1 million context window has now the same pricing. So this is also great. So you can actually now, per default, just use the 1 million token context window and not the 256,000. Token window. And what you can also now do is you can think about how you can now integrate this into your own architecture, because there's almost no reason anymore to stick to 4.6. Also, when we look at with the release cycle together with AWS, it's really cool. So I think it's one of the first model releases where you can see such a tight collaboration between a hyperscaler and a model provider. Because what AWS did is at the same time, there has been now these infrastructure updates coming in, which helps also with the auto scaling in the background, so that also spiky workloads can be tackled much better for models like Opus 4.7. And the other thing is that there is also a auto queuing coming inside Amazon Bedrock from AWS for Opus 4.7. So this makes also the whole rate limiting pattern that you need to be aware of much smoother. So there are less things you need to actually be aware of or care of now with what is actually happening for you managed under the hood. So yeah, really cool things. Maybe if you have any thoughts, we can dive deep a bit more into 4.7. Other than that, I would continue with Claude Code and Claude Design, because yeah, it was really crazy what was going at Anthropic.
Yeah, maybe just one thing, if we put Opus 4.7 at the market and see how the pricing behaves, for example. Opus is a little bit more expensive compared to the GPT models. So in general, Opus or Claude models are, I would say, across the board more expensive compared to the GPT models. Whether you compare the smaller models with with each other, or now Opus 4.7 with, for example, the Codex model or the 5.4 models, then you see that in the output tokens, GPT is $2.50 on a million input tokens cheaper compared to the Opus model. So I have a lot of customers who are thinking about this, that they are saying, let me use the most capable model for coding. But if you're having like a specific, like a very small but specialized workload, it's very often we're tending to use a smaller model that can do the job, and they save a lot of costs on that. And also in terms of benchmarks, Anthropic shared the benchmarks of Opus 4.7 and also Claude Mythos compared to the Gemini models and GPT 5.4. We will talk about Mephos in a second, but 4.7 Opus is has on the SweBench Pro what measures the capabilities in terms of coding. It achieved 64.3% compared to the GPT model with 57.7. And then compared to the Mephos model that we talk later about, it's even better. Mephos achieved 77.8%. So it's less capable than the Mephos model, but the GPT model is also almost 10% or exactly 10% less capable.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see that Anthropic has actually a model which is way ahead, a 20 points increase, and they're just not releasing yet. Yeah, super excited to get deeper also next into Mythos and what you have brought for us today. Let me also wrap up the Claude Code updates there, because it's also tightly connected to Opus 4.7, I would say. One thing what we can see is that Anthropic saw the issue of permission management, so that you as a developer are prompted to allow and deny permissions. And what they did is they had this file where you could say, for specific task, I already pre-approved it and don't ask me again. But still, this was quite a lot of tasks to prepare and to be really aware of and to manage as a team. And then you had this option of dangerously skip permissions. So previously you could say, hey, just do whatever and don't ask me. And now they have a clever solution to that. So what they do is they have a model trained on actually observing the permission asked, and things that are not dangerous at all, they are pre-approved by this auto mode now. And only very, very few things that are quite dangerous and need your attention, only then now you are prompted. And this is really cool as a developer. So it really helps you to not be in a state where your agent is interrupted a lot and you have to go there, click and observe. So I think this is going to speed up the development process a lot. And then there was this thing with routines.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. Maybe just one thing. If you compare this to Codex, in Codex, you can directly tell Codex to don't ask for permission and run for hours, and don't ask one time for a permission. In Claude Code, this was only possible in the CLI, right? So if you have Claude Code in the desktop app, then even the lowest level of permission asking was still asking me a lot of stuff during the execution. So that was a bit of annoying for me, because if you tell the agent or you plan to implement a feature that should be implemented or should run for a couple of hours, it was very annoying for me in Claude Code to tell all the time to give the permissions. So I would say this is the right step. I'm curious how capable the agent is in determining what it should ask me and what not. I think before that, Codex was much better in handling this for the user, so not asking for permissions. But also for Codex, it didn't have a model in the background to reason about what steps it should execute autonomously and what it should ask to the user.
Yeah, I also think this is the right step, because even with this full access mode, you still had this issue that you always thought, okay, but what if something goes wrong, and how can I have some sort of ease of mind and a guardrail? So I'm also really excited how good this one is working, and we can try it out now the next weeks and also bring it in the next episode. And I have to say, I was using most cases where I had smaller development of features, this full access mode in Codex, and this helped a lot. So to let the model also do some end-to-end iterations, even deploy things. So deploy and then check the deployed endpoint, for example, agent core runtime endpoint, and then to see how the deployed agent workload is working and if it needs tweaks. And then the other thing which I also wanted to show here about Claude Code is routines. So you had that feature already inside Codex. Over there, it's called automations. And what both of them do is you can think of cron jobs inside your coding environment. And they can run these cron jobs as task automations for you. And this kind of is now the pendant to what you would have done previously in N8N, just straight away inside your IDE. And what you can do is you just describe as a prompt or as a skill what the workflow is that you want to automate. Then you connect the APIs as MCP tools. And then what actually happens is Claude Code or Codex can actually automate your workflows for you. So look up your calendar, look up your Gmail account, look up your Google Docs, create a Google Doc. So all sorts of more complex workflows you can now automate there. Does it mean that you don't need N8N anymore? I would say definitely no. So you will still also need things like N8N. But this makes the entry so much easier for everyone because now you don't need to have this state chart. You just need your text, which describes your workflow, and that's it. And then you can automate things maybe in just 2 minutes. And previously it might have taken you a few hours. So this is really cool. So more people can create their automations. And what you can also do in routines is, and I found that quite cool, you have a calendar view and you can see in your calendar where each routine is being triggered. And you can also have per routine multiple triggers. So you don't need to create, for example, if you want to email summary workflow, you don't need to create 3 of them. You can just have one and then multiple triggers. So this is also a differentiation between Codex. There you currently have just one trigger. Probably they are also going to change it, but I found that also good. Yeah, eye for the detail by Anthropic, how they have also implemented the trigger point. And then there was Claude Design. So this came out of nowhere. They also label it as a Anthropic Labs announcement. So I would say it is quite good, but still few things feel like a beta, I would say. So for example, when I tried it out, I could create a slide deck. You could also create animated videos. You can create front-end designs. Then you can create also native iOS and Android design. So this works quite good. And you can also import your actual brand look. So you can take existing files and then it will understand how your brand design is working in terms of typography and your color palette, and even create, if you don't have it yet, tailored icons for your brand. So I found that quite cool. But then when you start, for example, let's say you see something on a slide and then you want to change the size of the font. You can do it. It applies it, but then it triggers a prompt in the background. And this felt a bit not polished yet. So these types of things, when you then really go into the detail. But I would say as of now, it's quite cool and you can get a lot of work done. Also, you can create quite good slides. But I think when it comes to things like exporting to Canva, from what I tested, or also there was one more thing which I just forgot, but maybe it comes back. Also when it comes to the token consumption, it consumes a lot of tokens. So when you have the pro subscription, as I have with Anthropic, this 5-hour window that I have, I could actually consume it in like 10 to 15 minutes with Claude Design. And I think I created around 60 slides. So now you can do the math and think about how you could actually scale that for yourself. Yeah, so just be aware of the token consumption is quite high, but it's going to get definitely better over time.
So if you're saying that you can create, for example, front ends for iOS and Android, I'm wondering how this behaves compared to Xcode. So Xcode also has like the Claude Code integration, right? So Apple announced it, I think, last month or 2 months ago, that you now have like finally a coding agent inside Xcode. So you're also capable of like building now or using agents to build your iOS apps. So I'm curious how this behaves or how both are compared with each other and which one is more capable and more easier to use maybe for iOS developers.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So to see how this gonna evolve over time. I would expect that Xcode should be better because they should have more data and guide the models more. But yeah, let's see. I mean, which of them really ends up to be the better one. And yeah, and then there is Mythos, Stefan. So what is it about?
Yeah, so Anthropic announced also Claude Mythos at the beginning of April in gated research preview. At least the gated research preview is from AWS. So I don't know how Anthropic says it, but Anthropic is offering this Mythos model only to a very limited amount of partners, because they're saying that it's like too powerful to release it to like the whole community or all customers. We need to wait whether this is like pure marketing, like a pure marketing announcement, but it's genius in my opinion, or whether it's really that powerful. And well, what is it? Like at the end of the day, like Mephos is another model that is still a general purpose model, but it excels in cybersecurity and like finding vulnerabilities in your code. So it brings like major gains in coding and reasoning and cybersecurity benchmarks. But Anthropic is explicitly not planning to make this model like GA as of now. So companies like Amazon have access to it, Google have access to it, and they offering it in gated preview to their customers. So that would mean that you as a customer of AWS, for example, need to apply and ask for access, and then you can test it. And it's, as of now, it's only available to American companies. So it's explicitly not offering it to like foreign countries. We have to wait until, or to see how that reveals in the future. And Mephos already like, and Anthropic announced it and showed it that Mephos like found vulnerabilities in OpenBSD, for example, like the hardened Linux distribution. So like a vulnerability that stayed there for 28 years and Mephos was able to find it. So this is very impressive, I would say. And the story is less about like releasing just another model, but like now bringing out a model that has like cybersecurity grade reasoning. So it will coexist with Opus. And I think then it will like be offered to customers specifically for finding vulnerabilities. I'm very curious how this will be commoditized and like released to other customers. Like think of like the Frontier agents from AWS that we will also now talk about in a few minutes, like the security agent that can find or does pen testing. How can these Frontier agents leverage Mephos to get the job done? I think as of now, there's a lot of speculation. We need to wait how powerful the model exactly is. But as of now, I think it's very interesting to see that Anthropic brought out a model, and this is now the first model that is not available to all customers right from the start. So let's see how this plays out. For Anthropic, it's, of course, if they announce it, and Mephos is like the first model now, all the vulnerabilities that Mephos finds, well, can't be found by OpenAI, right? Or by another company. So for Anthropic, it's like a nice move to bring this out first, make it available to a limited number of customers. And we have to see, normally in such a high competitive market, the competitors are bringing out models quite fast that can hold up or are even better than the ones that are out now. So let's see how the competitors answer in this regard, how like the Chinese companies answer here also. So I'm curious how this plays out.
Same here. I think there is also this announcement from OpenAI on cybersecurity. So seems like they're also working on that. But definitely this time Anthropic won the first mover moment. And I think it's well earned. They had this also back in the days with when OpenAI came out with GPT-3 and Anthropic was still very cautious and didn't want to release the model because they were worried about the implications that it would have. Now we see they play a different strategy this time and just go ahead with a first mover approach. And yeah, I also think like this type of technology anyways will land into people's hands and we will have it. I also think even in an open source version, maybe in 1 year or 1.5 years, I would say latest is my forecast. Yeah, but for now, let's see. I mean, let's see when we will really get access to it.
And speaking of open source, I think we should now jump out of the Anthropic world and let's have a look into the other models that came out in the recent months. As you said, like, the innovation cycle is so fast that we now have to talk like we have a full packed agenda with new models coming out every month. So Google announced Gemma 4, what is like a new multimodal open weight model class or model family. So that means like the previous one, Gemma 3, was text only. And now Gemma 4 is text, image, video, and audio capable. And it comes out in 3 different formats of 3 different models. So the smaller ones have 2.3 billion parameters. And the biggest one, what is like a mixture of expert model, has 26 billion parameters. And we also have a dense version so that is like 31 billion parameters. For those of you who are not aware, like a dense model means that for every token that comes in, all the parameters are used. So every token that comes in, all the 31 billion parameters are used. And for a mixture of expert, you have like special submodels within your environment that are, or only a subset of parameters are used based on the context and based on the input tokens that you're giving. So it's much more effective compared to a dense model, but a dense model gives you like higher reliability in terms of the output. So the Gemma 4 models come now with a context window of 128,000 tokens for the smaller models and 256,000 tokens for the 31 billion mixture of expert variants. So compared to the other open source models like the GPT OSS versions, the GPT models, the open weight models are text only. So they're very optimized for coding, for logic, and for agent workflows. The Gemma models are, because they're multimodal, they are good for like a wide variety of different use cases where you need the multimodal support. And I don't know how you see it, Puglia, but I see at the market that like companies or users tend to go into this multimodality. So they want to use audio to talk to agents. They don't want to type a prompt all the time. So I think that goes into the right direction, that you now have also these open source models supporting multimodality.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I would also say this is like not a small model release from Google. So this one is really important. And what it did is actually, so we all know like the models are going to get cheaper over time. And when it comes to the, let's say, proprietary models, we kind of see the price is kind of staying the same. Of course, with each release cycle, we get a much better intelligence in each model. And this is really fantastic. And it also leads to behavior changes. So to be very concrete, the newer model will solve a similar task much faster with less errors. So there you kind of save money, but still on a per token basis, you pay more. But now what we see, like when it comes to the direct token economy, you can see that like the Gemma 4 is a bit more intelligent than the Claude Haiku 4.5, but it's factor 10 times cheaper than Claude Haiku 4.5. And this is massive. So now we can really see like the drop in prices when it comes to the token economy itself. And now we can really see like hosting agents is going to get much cheaper. It's going to be more feasible to run them on edge devices, especially with models like Gemma 4. And yeah, I think this is an amazing release and really cool that Google also decided to make this one an open source model.
And speaking of like the costs, if you think about it, that agents becoming cheaper and cheaper, it makes them more like applicable to a wide variety of different use cases, because you have to think like if for a given use case, like a workflow that you implemented right now, you can determine the cost, like how much does this process cost? Then you need to compare how much, if I automate this process that was manual before, I need to check how much does the agent cost me. And if it's like a sky high amount of cost that the agent generates because the workflow is very complex and the agent has to reason a lot, it very often doesn't make sense for companies to automate this process, right? Like just because you can automate it, it doesn't mean you should, because the token consumption is so high that it's just not affordable, or that there is just not an ROI to do this and to implement it.
Yeah, I also agree. I think like this TCO, so total cost of ownership of bringing up these workflows, which were agentic, used to be much higher, and this is just fading away. And like I also think like for organizations now, having a conversation like, hey, can we just automate this on an agentic basis? I think like in few months, this is going to be not a question anymore. I'm really excited to see like how this will transform enterprises, how this will shape also new startups who probably will be digital native, agentic native. And it's really exciting. And just one anecdote, which I saw, it's not directly connected to that one, but maybe to the previous topics, but still showing like the behavior change we can see in society. I was just recently talking to a founder of a restaurant chain here in the Frankfurt area. So he has, I think, around 10 restaurants, and he is previously coming from a finance background, working in hospitality, then decided to create his own business. And he's not a tech guy at all, but he's creating everything which is like the web infrastructure of his restaurant chain on his own nowadays with coding tools like Claude Code or Codex. And with that, we can see like coding is becoming something that everyone is using, or agentic workflow automation is something that everyone is using, no matter what your profession is. And I think this is just getting started. So very exciting times. And I think there will be a lot of shifts like in companies, but also overall in society.
That reminds me a little bit, and like just one small anecdote to this, that reminds me back in my times at Microsoft about the Power Platform. And part of the Power Platform was Power Apps, like a low-code solution for building apps. And this was available, or should be used by like business users to build your own apps quickly and fast in enterprises to solve like different use cases. Like wherever you want to build an application, you can use it. And it doesn't, like, it's for business users, it's for developers, for everyone who needs to quickly build an app. But with AI, it's the same idea of this low-code solution, but without any of the boundaries. Because with AI, you can build like real code compared to a low-code app where you have like different building blocks for building something, but you're very limited to what you can build, how it should look like, how it is integrated into your workflows. With AI, you don't have these boundaries. So it's like low code without low. So let's see how that plays out.
I like that metaphor. Yeah, and when you think about this whole no-code environment we're moving, what I also see now with OpenClaw, it's really cool. So I got a Mac Mini, I have now a few agents running on it. So one of them is Andy doing my tech implementations. Another one is Charles helping me with organize my day-to-day work. But you also now checked out NemoClaw, which is like an enterprise version of it. So what is this one about, and where do they bring in this enterprise spice, and also like what I saw around permission management?
Yeah, so NVIDIA announced NemoClaw, I think a month ago. And NemoClaw is basically a wrapper around OpenClaw. And that means it adds like a safety and deployment layer to OpenClaw. What, as we know, like OpenClaw has no safety implemented. Like it's a very powerful, always on agent that runs in your environment. You don't have to give it explicit permissions. So if you give it like your credit card numbers, it like can use it and like buy things or do like any other work that you wanted to do. And NemoClaw adds like the safety and deployment layer, what is like an open source stack that simplifies like the onboarding, the lifecycle management, and the routed inference through the OpenShell gateway from NVIDIA. So before that, NVIDIA had, and this is because like when you think about the name, like NVIDIA had a Nemo like portfolio before, like a Nemo and Nemo guardrails that is like part of its AI stack, software stack. And this is like for building and optimizing AI agents. And the guardrails focused on the model behavior, as always. And NemoClaw extends this now by packaging the safety and privacy and agent deployment into one reference stack, rather than treating everything like as separate add-ons that you can add into your environment. And we have now a couple of OpenClaw enterprise deployments out there. So NVIDIA is not the only one. Like, for example, Moonshot has KimiClaw. KimiClaw has a different approach. It makes it just easier to deploy OpenClaw in cloud environments in just a few seconds. So it's a one-click deployment, and then you have OpenClaw in a browser-based environment. And you have like persistent memory, and this just helps like for a more human-like assistant experience. And this positions KimiClaw more like a hosted assistant platform in your cloud. And on the other hand, NemoClaw is more like a security and governance layer around OpenClaw. So what we see at the market right now is that the Nemo family, like NemoClaw, Nemo guardrails, sit very high in the AI stack of NVIDIA, above the raw GPU infrastructure layer that NVIDIA is famous for. The NVIDIA portfolio can be split now into like roughly into the hardware layer that we have, the what are like the GPUs and so on, and then the inference layer, what is like the Vera Rubin platform we talked about in the previous episode. And now also like the model building, like we have their open source model with Nemotron, and the application safety, where like the Nemo family is in. And NemoClaw belongs in this secure agent runtime layer. for building secure AI applications. And what we see now is that NVIDIA and all the other companies also are extending vertically or horizontally in their portfolio to give companies the ability to build AI applications end to end, rather than just offering a small subset for building agents. We see that with AWS having Trainian chips for the infrastructure, having now their own models with the Nova family, and offering an agent runtime. And NVIDIA, on the other hand, started with the chips, right? And now we are moving more up in the software stack, or to the software stack, with NemoClaw, because they're saying like OpenClaw is and will be operating system for agents in the future.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see that the stronger focus now from NVIDIA, and also like from a timing perspective, they were now quite quick, right? So to get this NemoClaw now out during GTC by Jensen. So yeah, I'm also like looking forward to learn more about it, also to see like how people experience it in terms of also like the whole security layer and how it helps also to scale this out in enterprise. Yeah, I think definitely a strong signal now from NVIDIA.
100%. And if you ask yourself, how can I like practically implement it? Well, it's open source, so you can just like run your container in Kubernetes, for example, and then run your NemoClaw instance inside Kubernetes. And then it adds you this safety and privacy layer.
And speaking of containers, one thing now also OpenAI is doing, now updated their Agents SDK. And this one is now really changing the architecture of their previous open source framework. And I would also say even their whole strategy. So let me quickly explain what this thing is about, especially the OpenAI Agents SDK upgrade. So they brought in few new terms, and I will also explain them so that there is also no confusion, because they use, I would say, peculiar terms now to describe like the patterns. And what the Agents SDK update is about is really that you have now a manifest inside your agent. The manifest is your file system memory. So this is comparable to OpenClaw, where you have also your MD files, and then your agent can create a folder structure and then sort his or her memory into this folder structure based on the MD files. It is also leveraging overall global agents MD, which is like you could say overall system prompt, but also like the skill descriptions and everything which tells the agent what to be aware of. And then they also go much deeper in terms of really making it smoothly to run your agents for longer periods. So they are now really precisely mentioning that this one is also capable of running agents for multiple hours. And how they do it is for example, with snapshotting, rehydration. So it means like even if you want to pause the agent, that's easily possible. You can resume where the agent stopped. If the agent fails, it's also not a problem. You have the rehydration, so the agent can boot up again and then continue and also like load its memory. And then they also go further and create other integrations like, for example, file system mounting. For example, also with S3. I found that really cool. And now we have also in parallel the S3 files announcement. So now we can also see like how the trend is shifting. And I would like boldly say, maybe when we talk 23, 24, a lot about RAG 26, we can see now it's really a lot about this file system based memory of agents. So it's quite funny now how simple the design of the memory of an agent became just with pure file systems. And then, so this is possible. So with that, you're also not bound to keep these files locally. You can host it easily in a managed cloud environment. So what they have is S3 connectors, Azure Blob, R2, and GCS. And then something I want to really dive deeper into, they talk a lot about harness and sandbox. And I think this is something we can dive deeper and make clearer. And for that, let me show you a diagram over here, which shows their architecture for that. So what they call harness is actually what you typically might know as an orchestration layer for your agent. So it's the agent loop, and it's the agent's knowledge of the tools it can call. So the tool descriptions, and then also the execution of the tools. So harness is equal to the orchestrator. So whatever we called previously orchestrator is here described as a harness. And then we have the sandbox. So sandbox, for the ones of you who are more known to the AWS infrastructures, sandbox is like a computer that your agent can use to create files, to read files, to create code, execute code, have access to a shell, and so on. And now what they do is, and I think this is a cool pattern, they call it either the harness is in the compute or harness and compute are separated. So the first approach is you can actually streamline the computer where the agent is running, comparable to what the OpenClaw pattern is as well. And then you have like the agent orchestrator and the computer where the agent has access to files. So this is like the first approach. You can deploy this one also anywhere you want. Or what you can do is you can actually separate them. So you have like your harness. This is over here. So this is where the agent itself is running, but the agent has another computer, completely separate machine, where it has its own sandbox. So running shell commands, executing code, and a file system. And now they even separate file system and sandbox. So you can have the file system on S3 and the sandbox can be a separate virtual machine. And everything we see here is also containerized. So you can basically deploy it anywhere you want. And one more thing, which is also great to highlight here, is the separation of secrets. So no matter where you deploy your agents, so either harness and compute or harness and compute separated, the file structure of the secrets is always fully separated from the other files the agent can access, read, and write. So with that, you can really make sure that there is no prompt injection scenario where someone is getting access to secrets and API keys and passwords. So this is also a great pattern in terms of security. One more thing, as the memory is configurable, just an example how it can look like. So here you have like your sessions as JSON lines, and then you have like the memory files and here put into different types of structures. You can also create your skills and then go ahead. So let me see if there was another example over here. Yes. So you can also, like, based on the agent itself, have like their own memory folder. So this is a reviewer agent having its own memory, or you have an engineering agent that they have fully separated parent folder structures.
And I think that what you just showed shows also that the strategy from OpenAI is also like scaling or expanding the portfolio horizontally. So adding more capabilities that you can build end to end. So not just a model provider, not just an SDK provider, but in this case, like running agents in production. And I think this is a pretty unique feature and feature set that OpenAI offers there. So this is much more, or bringing OpenAI much more into the direction of building agents in production. Because many of these features are not available in many like hyperscaler runtime environments for agents, like mounting the agent's MD file into the agent to give it like a more streamlined behavior. So that is very impressive to see how OpenAI builds a whole ecosystem of enterprise-ready agents out there.
Yeah, and I think also we really see like how this game now becomes, instead of like who hosts the model, who brings the model as a creator, but who is also like either helping to build the agent runtime or even hosting it. We can see a big shift there. And from OpenAI's perspective, so they have this few things are hosted by them. So like the sandbox itself can be hosted by OpenAI if you want to. And you can as well host it on AWS and other hyperscalers. But also what they brought in this time is they specifically mentioned that this SDK is aligned with the OpenAI models. And by aligning it, they could actually improve the performance. So now we can also see like the model providers build SDKs which are super aligned with their models and try to make it the best place to build agents with their own models. So I think from like now on, also with each iteration, we will see that this generic agent frameworks will probably fade now slightly away, and you will have now really tailored SDKs. Probably you can always switch the LLM, but the performance shifts are now going to increase, so that it even wouldn't make sense then to pick, for example, I won't mention names, but to pick, for example, a completely different SDK for OpenAI models and vice versa. It's also not like written, but this is something I'm kind of seeing that could happen.
So, and I think in that terms, what is also an interesting news that we should talk about, besides the Agent SDK upgrade or announcement from OpenAI, we also announced a couple of weeks or months ago, OpenAI Frontier. So OpenAI Frontier is a control plane for agents, basically. So it gives enterprises now the ability to run agents in their environment and then give all the agents that you have a shared context, a shared ontology layer. So now you can think about it like if you have your agents and you not just have one or two agents running in your company, but you have like 1,000 agents. And all of these agents need some kind of shared context because they have to know how they fit into the broader context of the company and having access to the underlying system of records that you have in your data lakes, in your data warehouses. But this makes it very challenging, right? To give these agents access to the underlying layer, to know about the other agents that are available in your environment. So OpenAI Frontier wants to bridge the gap and sit basically above your data layer, your company environment. So OpenAI Frontier sits basically above your system of records of your company and connects like the agent runtimes with each other, like giving a shared context, like a platform where agents can share the context with each other. And above them, you have your business applications, like your ChatGPT Atlas, your GPT Enterprise environment, and all the other business applications where your agents need access to. And this is also a sign that OpenAI moves from the model provider to like the enterprise operating layer, because you need the semantic layer to operate thousands of agents or hundreds of agents in your enterprise. And this is, I think, a big shift, that agents are more and more treated as your digital workers who need access to certain data sources, need guardrails, need access to business applications and the underlying data silos. And it gives like the scoped access, the auditability, the lifecycle management, instead of just a one-off chatbot that is connected to a rack in the background.
Yeah, and maybe closing up the latest OpenAI news, there was also the announcement of Codex, which has been also upgraded. So Codex can now access your computer with computer use. It has its own cursor. So you can actually do the work, and in the background, it has another cursor and can click through your application, install your own machine. It can also spin up a browser now, so similar to the Playwright MCP server. It can click through your web application end to end. And there have been also some cool integrations with long-term memory over all the threads that you have, and also some integrations with remote SSH dev boxes. So you can even have like other virtual machines where you run, for example, CI/CD pipelines, and our Codex can easily connect to them. So it's a very broad announcement and makes it much more useful for the full SDLC. So yeah, we're going to definitely have some experiments also around this and see like how you can actually automate much more of your development workflow.
Yeah, I have a lot of discussions with customers around not only coding tools like Codex or Claude Code, but also how this whole agentic coding changes your AI DLC, like your complete development lifecycle. And AWS calls it AI DLC. We had this approach from 2 pizza teams, for example, and now we are talking more about like 2 pizza slices teams. So making it even smaller. And then you have your agent that is part of your 2 pizza slice team, and how you need to also change your whole development lifecycle, because should you still use Jira as your ticketing system, like writing a Jira ticket will now take like the longest amount of time rather than just writing the code. So how will the personas change? Like based from or going from like the code writer, the software developer, more to an intent-driven developer who's describing the goal, what we want to achieve, and then observing the agent to achieve this goal. So how will the role of a software architect change? All these things are described in this AI DLC pattern. And that means like companies, and we see that very often, that companies describe like, we are now much faster in coding, but we are not shipping out features much faster. So that's why I think it is very important to also see how these coding tools fit into this AI DLC.
It's a very interesting angle, and also interesting to see like how 2 Pizza team has already shifted since I left.
Exactly. And speaking of the company that just left, the last news that we want to share is the Frontier agents from AWS went GA at the beginning of April. So the 2 Frontier agents are the DevOps agent and the security agent. So if you followed the AWS reInvent end of December, AWS announced the Frontier agents in preview, and they're now GA. And both agents are basically a managed service for you, and this is like the first of its class of agents that you can leverage through the AWS console. You can use them and they act basically as a separate worker in your environment. So the DevOps agent focuses on incident investigation, MTTR reduction, and like the proactive issue prevention. And if you go into the DevOps agent console, you see that the agent is creating a topology of your complete account. So it will check all the different connections between different services, how they are relate to each other, and based on this topology, it can then act as a support engineer, basically, that can start an investigation process. And it does that based on an alarm that you can create, for example, in CloudWatch. And based on this alarm, you trigger your agent. And then the agent does the investigation. And then it can send the logs and the findings to any other, maybe also monitoring solution from other partners like Datadog or New Relics, Splunk, Dynatrace, and so on. And it's also integrated not only into like your AWS environment, but like your CI/CD pipelines, your runbooks, your code repositories. And now with the GA came also a few other features that are notable. Like now the DevOps agent can integrate and connect to other cloud environments. So it's not only AWS based, but also it can connect to Azure environments. So you have one agent and many customers have a multi-cloud environment. And now you can use the DevOps agent to connect to your Azure environment and to your AWS environment. And the other agent is the security agent. So the security agent brings like continuous context-aware penetration testing into your system. So it continuously scans for security violations in your code, conduct on-demand penetration tests, and then creates a customized attack plan to expose these vulnerabilities. And as I said earlier, I'm pretty curious how Claude Mythos maybe can be combined with the security agent, but this is pure speculation. AWS says like that preview customers saw up to 75% lower MTTR and 3 to 5 times faster incident resolution, and then over 50% faster testing. I'm curious also from the community how you see that, whether you saw any improvements there or whether you already tested it in general. But I found it quite interesting how these hyperscalers are now offering these frontier agents as part of its portfolio and handling this at scale for millions of customers.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how fast also they went GA now, the two agents. And I think this is definitely like an amazing addition to each team. So to have the DevOps agent and as well the security agent. And when I think of my financial institute times at ING Bank and how much effort we invested as a team also for continuously running pen tests and getting certified. And now you can have that always on anyways from AI and continuously get better. And then I think, this is just amazing. And I hope like Mephos gets in there at some point, or Mythos-alike models. But I think, chances are quite high. So I think like it's like 90% plus that something like this will probably happen. And to wrap up, like the last news of today, I also brought is like Stateful MCP. So first off, what is Stateful MCP? This is a pattern already defined in the MCP framework, which helps you when you have an MCP server and an MCP client, that the server actually can interact much better with the client and memorize things, so memorize state. And this happens through 3 approaches. So you have elicitation, you have sampling, and you have progress. So what elicitation does is the MCP server can actually ask questions to the MCP client. And let me make it very tangible with an easy example. Let's say our MCP server is booking meeting appointments for us. So whenever elicitation comes up, the MCP server can now ask the client, hey, for what time do you actually want to book that meeting? In which room should it be, or in which area of the building? Then the client can answer the questions which came out through elicitation. Then you have sampling. Sampling is a good pattern for MCP servers because the MCP server itself doesn't have access to a LLM typically. So it can use sampling and tell the client to do some LLM actions for it and then give the answer back to the MCP server. So with that, the MCP server can actually become a workflow orchestration logic against the LLM. And then finally, we have the progress, which is also great when your agent is running for a longer period and really want to understand what is happening under the hood. Then the MCP server can stream the progress of the task it's going through back to the MCP client. So again, think of a longer workflow. Then the agent connected to this MCP server will get the upgrades, and then the agent can report it back to the user, so which could be a web client where the user can then see a progress bar or maybe a list of multiple tasks, and then can see like one task after the other is getting ticked off. Yeah, so this is the last one from my side today. Any more additional thoughts you have and you would like to share, Stefan?
I haven't tried this out, this new feature, but I would be curious from our customers. I don't think there are any stats as of now, but how much like of tokens they save through this new approach, or how much faster the response is right now and how much accurate it is. So I think like the evaluation of this feature is would be quite interesting to see in the future.
Absolutely. By the way, working on a blog post on this, so how you can deploy the stateful MCP server on Agent Core runtime. This is worth to mention. So runtime now natively supports these stateful MCP servers. So yeah, I'm going to share more around it beginning of next week.
Curious to see then.
Awesome. So it's a wrap. So thank you so much, Stefan. It was amazing time spent, and see you in the next time.
Same here. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.